Hi to all of you who are watching this video. My name is Teddy Edward. I go by Dr. Teddy Edward, and it's my pleasure this afternoon to really share with you some information on how to teach reading lesson that student will remember. So our session today is on high teaching practices. So we're gonna go over some strategies and things that we believe can really help you with your teaching if you are a reading teacher. So um, I am with the CBL team, and what we do is very simple. We, as a group, we train teachers to engage, develop student skills, and prepare them for test day. And we do that because what we do prepare student uh, by giving them the skills that they need to not only succeed on testing, but also the, we believe in giving them skills they need for the marketplace. And we also publish textbooks that help teachers teach and cover standards that address CASA's competencies and TABE standard, GED, ISET, and CTE, all that good stuff. So in a nutshell, what we do is to break down and promote proven adult learning insights that are useful to practitioners in adult education. So we take the hardcore research, we break that down, and we present it to teachers to make sure they can use it to improve their teaching and their student learning. So for today, here's what we're going to do together. We're going to keep it simple. Our objective is to, one, define reading comprehension and explicit instruction. We're going to also look at some teaching strategies and frameworks that can help you as an instructor improve your teaching comprehension activities. And lastly, we're going to reflect on the takeaways and summarize some key points that we discuss in the session today. So, reading is really based on a lot of stories. So when we talk about teaching reading, we're thinking about we really referring to really take the text and make that text tell a story that student can interact with and can question and also can analyze to see what's missing, what's there, what's not there. That's the beauty of reading. And strong reading skill kind of transform the learners. When learners are good readers, they are good learners. They can do more, they can learn math better, they can learn science better, they can access data, they can access difficult content because they have that skill, and the skill really bring them confident. They need to navigate the world and to navigate the academic world and also to navigate the real world and the marketplace. Now to start with this presentation, here's what we're gonna do. Before I get into objective 1, 2, 3, I want to tell you a story. It is about I would say, the most interesting encounter between a former enslaved man and a U.S. president. So to tell you that story, I need to take you to, we need to go back to 1865. This story I'm sharing is in a very interesting book that I really like called The Theme of Arrival. This book is by Doris Goodwin. If you have a chance to check it out, do that because it's a book that tells the story of Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. But this is a story for another time. Let's jump into our story. So let me tell you about the encounter between those two men. One, remember, an enslaved man, a former enslaved man with a U.S. president. So in 1965, I think it must have been March, and that prior to that, President Lincoln won re-election. So March 1865 was his inauguration, and thousands of people came to greet the president, shake hand, and say congratulations, all of that. In that line was that former slave, Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass probably had met the president several times before, I think at least twice. But that particular time, he went to greet the president. He could not. There were, some restriction. As a black man, he could not enter. And then somehow he talked to a few people. There he was in the line. So he found himself in the line, and then he got inside, and the president saw Frederick Douglass. He stopped. He opened his arm wide open to say, "Hey, Frederick, I'm glad to see you today." He shook Frederick Douglass' hands and then said to him, "Hey, look, what do you think about my speech?" Now, here's the setting. The line is long. People are moving, and thousands of people are waiting to say hi to the president. And Frederick Douglass saw that, and he moved on. He told the president, "Well, I don't want to stop the line," and he's moving away. The story in the book says the president of the United States stopped the line and turned to Frederick Douglass and asked him, "Hey, look, you need to stop now. You must stop a little because there is," and I quote what the president said, "there is no man in the country whose opinion I value more than yours. I want to know what you think of my speech." So, of course, long story short, Douglas stopped and told the president, yes, it was a sacred effort, it was a good speech, and then finally the president let him go. So, the lesson from this story, here's what you need to know about Frederick Douglass. He is a guy who learned to read at 12. He started learning to read at 12, he got into books, and he became a hungry for the letters. He became a very good writer by reading, by writing, and that skill he has developed over the years really has earned him a lot of respect to the point where a president of the United States will really care enough to stop him and ask what he thinks about the speech, just to tell you how important reading skill and that really lead to writing skill can be in the life of a human being. So that being said, moving on from this story, let's get to reading comprehension. So in the research, reading comprehension is presented in several ways, but one thing that we can agree on, it is about really understanding and making meaning from text. That's what it is. Now this, when I say text, it includes really background knowledge, decoding skill, and all of that. And one thing I like about something Dr. Willingham says about reading, it says the factors that are important really, it's the ability for students to monitor their comprehension, connect sentences they encounter for the first time with things they already know. So this is the kind of activities we are teaching students to do when we're teaching reading comprehension skill. So as you can see, it's pretty complex. So we need to be very explicit by telling students, hey, this is the strategy. This is what you need to know. This is what you need to do in order to access this text, interact with it, pull out meaning and information from it. So that we got it out of the way. We're going to look at, I'm going to demo the phases of a reading lesson. As I do that, I'm going to share some activities and with real textbook activities that you can look at, and also you will be able to download some of them if you want to. So now let me say I want to assume this lesson is not your first, and for because of that you already have student data. You have tests, pre-test score, diagnostics. You understand what your student need, level, challenges they face. You have a textbook. You have, the material you need to teach the class. By that I mean you probably have a curriculum, you have textbook, you can see, you already know what content you're going to be teaching, and then how to sequence them. Do you go from chapter 1, lesson 1 to lesson 17, or do you really skip? It's up to you, but I assume you have that. Now if you're looking at my screen and then you're like, oh, what is that? These books I'm using, they're from the CBL website, and if you want to download a sample, you probably need to go here and then just browse it, and you can get it, and the free download a free copy to review a free sample. So that's out of the way. Let's mimic a real lesson situation. So I'm gonna mimic the lesson activities, and I'm gonna start to share some tips with you, and then we're gonna keep the conversation going. So let's say you start your class, you have everything you need, and you get into your housekeeping stuff. You do your checking, you say hi to your students, greetings, announcement. If the program want to say something, you do that, making sure people know what's going on in the program. If there are things they need to do, things they need to know, you do all of that, and then you get it out of the way. And this is important. Also, the checking is super important. You don't want to start a class in a dry way. Where you just say, hey, open your book, let's go and do this. But it's better to check with students. One by one is ideal, to say, hey, to check with people and say, how you doing today? How was work? How was the commute? If you can do that, that's really prepare student for a smooth transition into more academic work. So now let's get into the introduction of the lesson. What should that look like? Well, your introduction really is where you set the tone to say, hey, here's the word map. This is what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be reading about this or that. Here's the skills we're going to focus on. Here's the tools, materials, and also if you want to do a review, it's a good time in your introduction to do it, where you tell student, about last lesson, what skill they covered, and things that you want them to remember. You can do that, and you take questions too, because sometimes students have questions. You want to know what's going on with them. So in your introduction, it's important that students have a clear guideline. They know when they're going to tackle a text, there's a few skills they're going to need to focus on. Now, you might say, why, Dr. Teddy, would you want me to say that, to do that? It's because what the research is showing is that most students don't know what to look at. They don't know what to focus on unless you really tell them. So you don't want to neglect that. You don't want to overlook that. What is an example of introduction? Here's one thing you can do. Maybe you have a book like that or you don't, but it's important, if you're using frameworks, you present your framework to a student to say, hey, we're going to look at how you access text. For example, let's take the SQ3R. We can say, okay, today we're going to focus on how you survey, question, read, recite text, and things like that. You could say, this is what we're going to look at. Or maybe in terms of content, we're going to talk about health or employment today. So that's what we're going to be reading about. Or you could also get into more specific with student. You could say, in this lesson, we're going to probably identify main idea, supporting details. You decide what you want your student to be thinking about as they approach the lesson. Another example of that is if you look at in this textbook, the way it is presented, there's a breakdown of the SQ3R method that tells students, if you're going to survey, do this. And after you survey, do this, and if you're going to read, do this. So the steps are clear. I assume you have something like that for your student. This is what we call explicit instruction. Now, why is that important? Again, as I said, students don't necessarily know what to do or what to look for unless the teacher or you tell them directly, hey, this is how you do this. If you have your if you share your instruction, you share the roadmap, you share the strategies you want to tackle. Now let's get into the pre-reading. So this demo is divided into pre-reading, during reading, and post-reading. As I said before, what I want to tell you, what I want to do is at every phase, I'm going to stop and share some strategies and show some tool and how it is supposed to be done. That way your student can go through a sequence that really makes sense to them. So let's move on to the pre-reading stage. What I like to tell people is this. Teaching reading is really telling stories. So when you have a text, what you want your text to do is to tell a story. Or if the text is short or long, what you do is you look at it and say, hey, what story can I make that will help students access this or think about what they need to get away from these passages. So in the best phase you have to really set the tone is your pre-reading activities. You can start with a controversial idea. Hey, I heard people say this. Do you agree? Do you don't agree? Do you disagree? You make prediction or you ask students to guess. And all of that is to activate the background knowledge. That's what we commonly say, but really what you're doing is to get students to think about, hey, this is the context where we're going. This is the type of, vocabulary or the type of language you're going to be hearing. So, and once you your pre-activities like that, you can start getting into the text, pulling some vocabulary. For example, like this, you could say, oh, let's look at the objective, and then here's a few vocabulary words. Why don't you, with a partner, work to match them to see if you understand the meaning. Now, one thing that is interesting in teaching vocabulary in this concept, you keep it short. This list has 7, and also you want to teach vocabulary in a meaningful way instead of doing word translation, things like that. Whether you teach, especially if you teach ESL, you don't want to go there. So avoid just word for word translation as much as you can. Now, if you look at this pre-reading activity, it does two things. We pre-teach the vocabulary, and also we get students to do make some prediction. So that's, again, it's a way to get them going. Or if you don't have a pre-reading activities like that, you could say, hey, why don't I start with a picture? A picture can really get things going, because the picture tells a story and students are trying to guess what that story is. What do you see in the picture? What is it? And then people start talking about stores and stuff like that, and then they can guess where you're going with that. So there's also, as you deal with more academic students or more advanced students, you can get into some real controversial questions. As I said earlier, you get into more questions to get students to think. Hey, for example, what do you think happens to housing, jobs, and daily life when too many people move into a small city? Something like that. So people start guessing and they start giving you responses. So that's to set the tone for whatever story the reading passage will tell students. And that way, if there's words they're gonna be difficult, you take some time to really explain that. Now, that was our pre-reading activity. So once you're done, you transition to doing reading. Now, doing reading activities, there's a few things you need to pay attention to. One is the type of questions. Are they low level or low order thinking? I call them LOTs, or high order thinking. So if you start with low level, your text only has those where you want to also find a way to bring some level 3 to level 6, what we're talking about here on the Bloom taxonomy scale. So if you look at the pyramid, you don't want the student to stay at the bottom. This is what I'm saying by that. So you want to push student from remember, understand, and move them up to apply until they can get to create. So I'm going to show an example of that in a minute. So what I'm saying is this. If you use the Bloom taxonomy, pay attention to higher order thinking questions, because that's where your student will struggle. And these are the questions students need to do well on: the I set, GED and also the higher level of CASAS and TABE or Class E. So keep that in mind. This is where the learning happens. This is where the struggle is. So if you look at your doing reading activities, that phase is really the class. That's the bulk of the class. You focus on reading time where people stay quiet, they answer questions, they read, they answer question. Avoid interruption, avoid texting, talking, chatting. You want students to develop the habit of interacting with text alone by themselves where they can get the content, interact with it, and answer key questions. Because at the end of the day, that's what they're going to do on the post-test. If they're taking the GD, that's the deal. If they're taking the ISET, the reading, the science, that's what it is all about. And the social study too, for in that context. So to go back to what Dr. Daniel Willingham says, you need to know when you are in that doing reading phase. That's where you create opportunity for them to monitor, and then they monitor the comprehension, they're connecting sentences with sentences and paragraph with paragraph, and also connect what they are seeing on the text with things that they know, things they have in the background knowledge. So it's important that they can quickly make those decisions. So that what you're going to see when you have lower level readers, that's where the struggle starts. That's where you provide enough scaffolding to get them to answer level 1 and level 2 questions until they get to level 3 to 6. So once you do that, you dedicate the time, your students are reading, they're answering questions, and then they can get back to you. You can check with them to see if they're doing well, or you can let them know they can check with a partner to see if they're doing well. And more importantly, when students are missing questions, it's key that they sit down to see why they misunderstand a statement or they misunderstand a passage. I think that's where the learning will happen, because a lot of times students need to know why they get something right and why they get it wrong or they missed it. So, with example, if you have a lower level student in ESL, you're probably going to start with basic reading content like that. Envelope, read. What type of question do you have? It's a what, the when, and things like that. But one interesting thing here, if you look at question number 4, you say, why do we use addresses on envelopes? Again, that goes beyond what they are seeing on the paper. So that's when you get to challenge their thinking. Another example from the reading might go is this reading on the importance of household budget. It's, hey, why do you have a budget? Tell me, there's a story there. Student can be reading this, they take time to read, and then here's the type of question I would throw at them. If you look at them, one thing we do in this type of books, I think CBL is pretty good at doing that. We really take question, we move a student pretty fast from low-level question to high-level question. The reason is that's where you want them to be. That's where you want them to struggle, and then you provide the scaffolding to get there. You see, what is the primary purpose of? Summarize the author's advice of for, this goes beyond the basic information you see in this text, and we want our student to be doing that. Now, another example is house utility bill. Student, it's like data. It's a table of data. Student reading, they're looking at money and different type of things. So again, you're gonna see we're gonna have what is the primary purpose of this based on the table, and you see the question there is vocabulary question where students need to find some specific concept, but at the same time they need to answer a question like, okay, why is this service fee listed separately from that? They're looking for a reason for something. That again, that gets students to think about the skill they're using to approach the text. Another example is to get to longer text, the rise of big business and industry. So that's in the transition textbook. This book helps students transfer from ESL to GED and ISET. So the purpose of this book is really to help students develop academic language. As you can see, there's the key concept in bold, and if you look at the question, they're not yes, no, or choose the best answers, things like that. Now, here's the thing. As you work on reading comprehension skill with students, there's an important consideration to make. When students in the class are working on multiple choice question, they have the opportunity to guess. You would not know if they guess or not. Our philosophy at CBL, what we do, we eliminate multiple choice question during practice session. So if you look at our books, we don't have really multiple choice question in the practice question because we know that doesn't help students. They don't struggle enough. They don't pay attention enough to the text. They can just guess, and teachers will not know because students guess all the time. And if you have 4 options, that's a 20%, 25% chance. Hey, most likely student can do well if they keep doing that. So you will look at this. You see, these texts come with a set of questions that requires reading, and this is an important thing to do in your reading. In the doing reading phase, I encourage teachers to focus on getting students to respond to answer questions with long or complete sentences instead of choosing the correct answers. So another example of doing reading activities is where you get to vocabulary. Every text you present has a set of new vocabulary that students should access. So having vocabulary activities allow you to test understanding. And then if you look at exercise number F, I like that because what it does, it starts some prompt. It's again an activity which include reading comprehension and writing skills where students need to complete a full sentence based on what they understand from the text. Okay, so what else you need to keep in mind? So when you have a text, that's an example for from our tab 13 and 14 textbook. When you have a text, whether it's short or long, you need to look at the type of text also, and also and is it an easy text, or does it require more academic knowledge, or is it really content based? What you're looking at here, it's a text that talks about protecting the earth. You have recycling in it, ecosystem, things like that. So these texts, you want to make sure that before you get to this reading activity, the student have already seen the key vocabularies, so when they get here, they don't get stuck and asking and calling you. So, or I'm going to address that sometime. There's when it comes to vocabulary, you can teach a text without doing pre-reading activities that include teaching the vocabularies. Why is that? Is because students need to learn to use context clues to guess the meaning of words. They don't have to rely on the teacher for every lesson to tell them ahead of time why this is what the word's gonna be. Especially if you're doing practice tests, I recommend you never pre-teach the vocabulary before these sessions because you want the students to struggle by themselves to make sure they can get into a reading text when they see a word they don't know, but they use their knowledge of the other words around that particular concept and come up with a meaning. So here in this text, you're gonna look at reusable, emissions, ecosystem, conservation. You want students to come up with a meaning for that, even though you did not pre-teach it, and then you get into questions. So if you look at the questions again, they're not simple question yes or no. And then when you get to a number 9, which is interesting, you go back to the vocabulary again to really test whether student guessing when they say they will respond to a question, or do they really get it. So that again help you test how they use the knowledge to come up with the understanding for this word. So now we're done with doing reading. As I said before, doing reading is all about reading. And teacher need to stop and sit and relax and then stay quiet and let students interact with text without interrupting them. So once this phase is over, the story continues. Now the story moves to post-reading activities, and I call it also knowledge transfer for many people who overlook that. So when you get to post-reading, this is when you personalize content or reading, and then this is where you create situation for students to transfer whatever they're doing in the class, whatever skill they are using, to a real-world situation. That's really harder than it sounds. I would agree with anybody who says that. So what can you do for post-reading activity? You get into what students like, do not like about the reading or about the discussion, preferences, experiences. They can do that. And also, this is your best opportunity to differentiate your class. Because in that phase of the reading, it's not about the text only, it's not about the general knowledge, it's about individual preferences, knowledge, and taste, and how they view the text. So it is super important to do that here, because this phase, in this way, students feel that they belong, they count, they have a voice to either add something that is missing, something they do not agree with, or something they dislike or like about the text. So that's key in the story you're telling the student. So, example, in a short ESL class, a post-reading activity after student read about introduction could be, hey, now transform this form into your own form. Complete that with your own personal information. This could be a practice too, but that also can be a post reading activity where students can use their own personal information to complete an activity. So that's a very simple one, and then you can do the same here. If you remove a text and then you create sentences with concept from a text, can the student, without looking at the text, also fill in the blanks? That's an example. And then student can write questions about the text. That's a very beautiful thing to do, because a lot of time we ask student questions. So flipping the table allows student to ask questions about what the author says, what the text present, and the concept that is discussed in the text. So this is a beautiful way to tell the student, hey, now it's your turn. So and to integrate reading activity with writing skill, it's good to also create opportunity for students to summarize what they read. I call that a super skill, and I encourage teachers in every lesson, math or science, social studies, if you can get students to summarize what happened in a lesson, that's a good way to really help them process information and develop skills that they're going to need in the real world, especially reading skills. Summarizing really put pressure on student mental power to get them to sit down and take a bunch of information and pull the essential out of it. The more teachers practice this with students, the better students get at seeing things from the big picture to narrow things down to, to create what you call the essential part of, to put together the essential part of a big picture. So it's critical to do that in every class, and as much as you can, budget time for students to summarize what they're reading, and then so you see how much they understand. Also, it's good for them to talk about it. Now let's look at knowledge transfer. What do I mean by knowledge transfer? Now the problem with students taking tests today is that they do well in the classroom, and when they go on test day, they cannot transfer what they learned from the classroom into the testing situation. Why is that? It's because they haven't seen it, and we need to show that to them over and over again. So an example of that is to start taking what's in the book and transfer that to really real life situation. It's a way to force students to see things from leaving the textbook's context behind and find other things they need to look at that does not resemble the textbook itself. An example, if you can find a memo, a real memo, for example, this is a dress code memo or something where a student can read and see how that is written in real life or a real job, you can use something like that. And one thing I like to do is to ask people to go to government websites. Yeah, what you're looking at is a New York City MVA DMV website where they provide information to readers who want to renew their license or insure their cars. This is the best thing for you to do, but to get your student to a website like that and provide some questions where they can go and answer question to address some real issues in the real world, because a government website is a real thing. It's not made for students, and then asking questions to find information, it's a real skill, and that takes real reading skill to find key information. Practicing this helps students really think about when you say a main idea, supporting detail, and you're looking at a opposite idea, stuff like that. So they take this type of skills and then they go to a website where they get to see, okay, if I'm looking for special registration condition, where do I go? Because they should be able to see the title, and then they need to find important details, important links to click and find the information they're looking for. So that again is useful with sample text. Also, this time we bring more rigorous text, longer text for students to deal with. Equally important is when you're done with your knowledge transfer thing, you also need to think about in your chapter, is there anything students need to reflect on in terms of what they learned and what they remember and what they want to remember. So in a chapter where you teach strategies, you want to give students a chance to reflect on strategies, where, for example, in doing reading, the things they did, question they miss, how they make connection with the test, questions that mimic the question they will find on the text, on the test, and then that way they can look at their weaknesses and strengths, and then they can come up with action step to work on these particular skills and improve it. An example of that could be students feel that they struggle with finding main ideas, and you're like, okay, what is it what is missing? What is it the student cannot identify that prevent that student from seeing a text and say, hey, this should be the main idea of this text, or this text is about that. And this is an activity you can repeat as a teacher in a classroom over and over to help an adult learner develop that sense of reading, where they see a text, they already go to the main headlines and then go into the paragraph, zoom in to look at, to see, okay, what is the topic sentence here? Okay, what are the details? What is essential for me to know? What are details that I can throw away? This is a very, very important skill. Again, it must be taught explicitly. Now we get into metacognitive skills. So metacognitive skill, again, here is to teach student thing and then look at the things that is taught and let them reflect on it. What do they struggle with when it comes to this framework? What is it? What does that mean? What is the meaning of the framework? You give them a tool to navigate reading. They can use it, but at the same time, they need to know what it means, and also they need to know how to use it, and they need to know if they're doing well in using it. Once they do that, you can move to other aspect of their learning journey to see, hey, what is clear, what is not clear for them. And as you do that lesson after lesson, that's how students get to mastery. So another example would be to ask students directly to talk about what they learned from a chapter, what strategies they practice, what reading strategy, writing strategy, and then what challenge they face. So when you pull reading strategies from the conversation, when you pull it, you say, student, hey, this is an example. Okay, give me an example of something like that you did or something similar. It help students develop those strategies and go and reflect on them and refine them. And this is super important because that's what, again, I call explicit teaching. At CBL, we are all about explicit teaching. We believe students should be learning to do things, and then once they get the basics, they practice it themselves, and then they can go ahead and apply it in real time. We don't expect that student will come to class and then get try things until maybe they get it one day. I think somebody need to tell them directly. So at this phase, what I would encourage you to do, if you're watching this video and you're in the middle of the story, I'm gonna summarize everything. We are doing the story of a reading class that student will remember. We started with pre-reading. We did during reading and post-reading. Now in a normal class, I would do this, or you can do that also. It's what did you get from the session, and then what ideas would you like to try, or in your teaching context. That would be my reflection. Again, you can take that away. You can use it for yourself too. So now, that being said, if you do that, maybe there's one thing you want to do differently. You can share with us in the comment, and we'll be glad to know what you want to do differently. And then now let's look at we're gonna get into the summary. But before I summarize this, please, you can follow CBL online. We publish really evidence-based insight to help teachers really save time and do their job well. And we have a great YouTube channel where you can go and get video for your student, and play it at the beginning of the class or at the end of class, or for you too, depending on what you want to do. And we have a lot of folks using this for professional development. We have a blog. Feel free to check it out if you're looking for tips or stuff like that. And more importantly, what I told you earlier, the book I am using here in this presentation, they are from our web page. We do have the textbooks, but you want to see sample. There's no string attached to them, so you just go ahead and click and get a sample for yourself. So, and then if you have a question, let us know. If you click on the sample page, this is what you're going to see. It's going to take you on all our arsenal of textbook, and then you can go and download the books you want to try. We have a masterclass for test preparation also coming up. So this session is closed, so you can also visit our page. You will see it. In summary, this is what we told you, and to summarize, that's everything I talked about in this session. First, we told you in your introduction that students should receive a roadmap with clear strategies and tools that they can use to access reading and make sense of what they read. It's key because if you give students explicit instruction, they will do better in their reading. So, and if also they get to work on difficult concept at the beginning of before they get into the text, that will help you go a lot faster. Especially if you're teaching a 60-minute class, you probably want to get your student a chance to learn vocabulary before they get into the text. However, remember, I also said if you want your student to learn to guess meaning using context clue, you need to not use this strategy. You need to let students struggle with a text where they have to use their own skill to determine the meaning of some keywords. So the introduction. So now let's go to pre-reading activities. Pre-reading activities. That's where I should have talked about the vocabulary teaching. So you want to be controversial. You want to be good and interesting, where you trigger student interest to get them to think about a story you're going to tell them. Again, teaching reading is really a way of telling stories and making text tell a story that is interesting for your students. So for your pre-reading, remember, be controversial. Let student guess. Let student check with the partners, and come up with the wild guess they can. And it's it's wide open. There's no right or wrong answer at this phase. So doing reading, be clear on the strategies students are using and be clear on the type of question you are using. You want to give students something to lean on, a tool to use to get to the text, to monitor the comprehension, to connect sentence and paragraph and make meaning out of them. And this is key. And again, if you forget anything else, remember doing reading activities, this is what your student do is to read. No instruction, no interruption. You give them the reading text, the passages, they interact, they take the time to answer questions. Of course, you're gonna time them, but you want to give them enough time to access the text, negotiate meaning, and then make sense of whatever the concept they are dealing with to answer key questions. Answering key question, again, I said something important you need to remember. Your student will do better if they answer questions directly instead of choosing the correct answers. As I said before, at CBL, it's our philosophy to let students struggle during the learning process. Then, when they get to practice tests, that's when you bring in multiple choice questions because that's what they're going to face on the test. But in your class, I would say focusing or teaching with multiple choice question is a big no-no because your student will not think enough of the content. You will not force them enough to interact with reading passages because they can also guess, especially if they're tired or they're going to an evening class. And lastly, but not least, is the post-reading. Post-reading again is fun. That's when you start with a reading passage that tells a story and then you get student into that story where they get to personalize the content, what they like, what they don't like. Anything else they want to add to this content is fair game. It can be controversial. They may hate the content. Whatever the author says, they may dislike it or they may disagree with it. That's the beauty. That's one thing we do. In the academy or in academia, that's what happened. When you get to write research, you get to challenge researchers that came before you. So again, at this level, in whatever class, ASL, GED, I said class, you get students a chance to do the same thing too. That's again an engagement strategy where your student can feel that, oh, they are part of the lesson. They get to say something. They get to be themselves. They're not necessarily following a script where they have to do what they are told, but they also can say what they like, what they don't like, and what they think is interesting, what's boring. So, in a nutshell, those are the phases I presented. So, if you have questions, feel free to email us and contact us and let us know if you have any question about what I just said, and feel free to visit cbledu.com for more questions. These are the books that I use in this presentation, my reference, and then that's the article by Dr. Willingham. If you want to check it out, it's a great one on reading. And don't forget, you can always follow us on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, where we share, again, evidence-based insight to help teachers and program engage, retain, and prepare students for test day. And then in addition to that, what we teach really is to provide students with skills that they can take to the marketplace to get a job they like, or to study, to go to whatever career option they desire. So I hope you get some insight from this presentation. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to get your comment in the comment section, and don't hesitate to email us if you need to share questions or anything else you want. Again, our email is teamcbl.com. Feel free to email us with your question. So on that note, I want to say thank you for watching this, and Until next time, Dr. Teddy Edward.